Marhaba, I'm Hania and welcome to my channel. In today's video we're going to be continuing with video 4 of our how to make Msemmen video series. Today we're going to be preparing an Algerian specialty called Mahadjob that uses the Msemmen dough. We'll be using the no-knead method of preparing the dough that I previously shared with you all. If you'd like to take a look at that video, just click the link below. All the ingredients are listed up on the screen as well as in the description box below. Bismillah, let's begin. The night before, we're going to take a large mixing bowl and add our salt, flour, semolina, and water to a large mixing bowl. We're going to mix the dough together completely. It's going to be rough and really shaggy looking, but that's fine. That's exactly what we want here. Then we're going to take the dough and then we're going to cover it with a clean kitchen towel or even a lid and leave it to rest overnight for 8 to 12 hours. And here you can see our dough the next day. It's going to be really nice and elastic, as you can see, much like chewing gum. And now we want to begin by preparing the filling. As you can see here, I'm slicing the onions and then also chopping the tomatoes into large diced cubes, as you can see here. I'm going to saute the onions in oil until they are nice and soft and almost caramelized. Now I'm going to add in the seasonings of salt and pepper to taste, of course. And then also add in the chopped tomatoes that we cut earlier. I'm going to give that a good stir. And then I'm going to add in my thyme. The thyme is optional. It's not a traditional ingredient used in Mahdjouba, but I find it lends a really nice, delicious flavor. I'm going to add in the tomato concentrate, the tomato paste, as well as the harissa. The harissa also is optional, but is traditionally used, and I do recommend it. We're going to allow this mixture to cook until all the liquid has evaporated and it's become nice and caramelized and thick. As you can see, it is here. And now we're going to move on to the next part of our recipe by buttering all of our dough and also greasing or buttering our large tray, as you can see that I'm doing right here. I'm going to form about 20 balls that I'm going to, of course, form into smooth balls as I'm doing here and make sure that they're really nice and round and soft. Now I'm going to gently brush the top of each ball with butter, or you can optionally use olive oil or even vegetable oil if you like. I'm going to cover the tray with some plastic wrap so that it doesn't form a crust. If your dough does form a crust, unfortunately it will damage the dough and you will be unable to stretch out the dough. So it's very important to keep your dough covered until use. As you can see here, we're ready to use our dough. As you can see here, I've covered it nicely. As you can see that our dough is all nice and soft, quite soft and elastic. So of course I'm going to take out one of the balls and keep the rest of them covered up so that they don't form a crust. I'm going to set those to the side and prepare my work surface. So as you can see here, I have the same setup as I did in the previous video. I have an old baking tray which I've turned upside down, and then I also have a square cardboard that I'm using to help shape our mahadjob into nice shape, nice equal square shape, as you can see here. So this is basically going to help you to stretch out the dough so that it's nice and thin, and also gives you a kind of a guide on how to stretch and where to stretch your dough so that it is nice and even, and also the baking tray will help you to manipulate the dough. So we're going to begin by buttering our work surface, just as in the previous video. I'm going to butter the cardboard as well as the baking tray, as I'm doing here. And of course I will be also buttering the dough as well. So you do want to make sure that you are buttering everything very well. This is not a diet recipe, as you can see here. Now we can begin by shaping all of our dough. So as with the previous videos, we are going to start by patting out the dough, as you can see here. A nice patting motion. Pat, pat, pat. You can pat in counterclockwise or clockwise motion. It's really up to you. I find that this patting in a circular motion is the easiest way. So as you can see, I'm just keep patting the dough. So we are patting the outside. We are going to leave the inside a little bit thick for now, but we're going to work on keeping the outside stretched out and thin, as you can see that I'm doing here. So once we get a hang of this motion, then we can kind of stretch with our fingertips or smooth the dough, spread the dough out, as you can see that I'm doing here. I showed you this method in my previous videos. If you'd like to take a look at those, you can see those linked up in the info cards as well as in the description box below. So as you can see, we are just using the baking dish as our guide of where to stretch. So of course you want to do to keep the cardboard in the middle so that everything is nice and even. So we want to stretch the dough over the cardboard, as you can see that I'm doing here. So you want to stretch it over the baking tray, and you always want to keep the cardboard completely in the center, of course. So as I mentioned before, we're stretching the outside of the dough, and we do want to leave the middle a little bit thick because this is where we're going to be placing our filling. So as you can see, I'm stretching it out. You also can see that there's already a little hole that's forming there. That's completely fine. Small holes like that are fine, but you don't want to have big holes, because the big holes are the holes where your filling will seep out of the dough and it'll basically ruin your whole mahadjob. So we're going to continue stretching the dough. So if you're familiar with making strudel, this is basically the same kind of idea. So when you're making strudel, you stretch the dough over a table. So this is kind of our makeshift table, as you can see here. So as I mentioned, there was some holes, but that's fine. We're just going to keep working. So now I'm just going to put the filling right in the center of my mahadjob dough, right there on top of the cardboard, and spread that out. You do want to be generous with it, but you don't want to go overboard, because too much filling will make bigger holes in your dough and the dough won't be able to support the filling. So I like to spread it out evenly so that every bite you get a piece of the filling. Just like that. And now we can begin by stretching the dough over the filling, as you can see. So this is where the cardboard actually comes into place. It gives you a guide of where to stretch, as you can see here. And then we can use the baking tray to turn everything around and make it easier for us to stretch the other side. And I'm going to repeat the same process on this side. As you can see, there is some holes there, but that's fine as long as we have everything covered. So we really have to make sure that the dough covers any holes that have formed. As you can see here, it's nice and square. It's not completely the size of the cardboard, but that's fine because we're going to be transferring it. Now we're ready to bake our mahadjob. So we want to preheat a skillet, a tadjine or tawa, or anything that we're using to bake our mahadjob. So now I just put some little bit of butter on my tadjine, my preheated tadjine. So we do want to bake our mahadjob on a low heat. We don't want it too high. And I just put the mahadjob right onto the skillet, the tadjine, and I'm pressing down. So the reason for that is so that our mahadjob gets a little bit bigger, and also it becomes easier to peel back the cardboard, as you can see. Don't worry about any kind of thing that you're going to burn your hands, because the cardboard is protecting you against the heat. So we do want to have our mahadjob completely moving around in our pan, so you don't want it to completely burn. You don't want even to have a really brown mahadjob. You always want to keep turning it around, inshallah, so that it's nice and golden. Burnt or even really dark mahadjob will be very bitter, so that's something you do want to avoid, inshallah, if possible. So we're going to keep cooking our mahadjob on both sides until it's really nice and golden, and then once it is, we can just lay it on a plate and continue with the next one. So now I'm going to show you another method on how to prepare your mahadjob. So this time we're going to prepare several mahadjob at one time and then bake them off at the same time at a later time. So as you can see here, I just put the dough right on the board on my baking tray. I didn't use the cardboard this time. We'll be using that a little bit later. So again, I'm just stretching the dough. I'm patting it out, pat, and then smoothing it out until it's nice and thin. The same way as before, I'm working from the outside of the dough, as you can see here. I'm not really touching the inside at this point because I want to stretch from the outside. So the inside, from this method, it's even more important to have the middle completely hole free and a little bit thicker so that it does support your filling later when we do add it in, as you can see what we're going to do in a minute. So you can keep turning your dough around to see where you need to stretch a little bit more, where the thick parts. As you can see, it's really easy. So this is really a real visual way to show you why I like to use this upturned baking sheet, as you can see here. So I'm going to use another filling this time. I'm going to use Gouda cheese. You can use any filling that you like. So I'm just folding one side over, as you can see here, completely. So this is going to serve as our base. We have a little hole there, but that's fine. I'm going to add the cheese, all of my cheese right there. So you do want to make sure that you keep your cheese inside the mahadjob and not outside because you don't want any burnt cheese. I'm going to fold in the next side, and then the next side, and then fold the last side over. So you can see that this parcel is much smaller than the previous one, but that's fine because we're going to be laying it on a baking tray, on this tray right here that I've also buttered and covered with plastic until later. So when we're ready to bake off from our Mhadjebs, we're just going to take our cardboard that we used previously, put some butter on it, and lay our smaller Mhadjeb parcel on there. So we're going to smooth it out, make it into a nice little square form, and then we're just going to flip it right onto our preheated Tadjine, skillet, tawa, or whatever you're using. So you just want to fix it a little bit, and with the previous one, just press down a little bit. So your hand is going to act as a weight so that the Mhadjeb gets bigger a little bit, but also keeps its form. So when you are not using this method and you try to transform the Mhadjeb just by your hands, it usually comes out lopsided and rectangular. And
it still has its nice rectangular shape.
Its nice square shape, as you can see that it is here. So you do want to keep the Mhadjeb turning around, as I mentioned before. You want it to be nice and brown. Occasionally add some butter on it so that it gets a really good rich flavor. Keep turning it. It'll kind of puff up, as you can see that it has there. It'll be really nice and rich and delicious. So just be sure to keep turning your Mhadjeb around in the pan, flipping it over, and making sure that it gets golden brown and not dark brown or burnt. So as I mentioned before, a dark brown or even burnt Mhadjeb will be quite better. So you can make 2 at a time, as I am doing here, or if you have one of those electrical skillets, you can make even more, several at a time, whichever works for you. Here's our Mhadjeb at the table. It's delicious, slightly spicy from the addition of the harissa, rich and hearty yet thin and buttery as well. Mhadjeb is great for lunch or a light dinner. Everyone enjoys it, really, honestly. I hope you've enjoyed this video and all the videos that I've presented so far in this series. And if you did, don't forget to give it a like and let me know what you thought of this video or all the previous videos in the comments below. There are a few more videos in this series, so please stay tuned for those. And if you're new here, check out the rest of the videos or any of my other playlists that you can find on my channel. Until next time, sahatkum and peace be upon you.